Thank you. We have, we're down to 5 panel members. Melissa Conley-Tyler did have to leave, but we do have the other 5 panel members. But of course, the main aim of today is really to farewell Ambassador David Daly, to wish him good luck in Sri Lanka, and where you'll be picking up some experience of South Asia that you've previously had in a previous career. But I will hand over to David, and David gets to speak for as long as he likes, which I think will be not very long, and at which point I'll open it up to a discussion. And I know we have some questions from the floor, and feel free to pose those to any of the panel members. So if you don't mind me having my lamington and tea, my official duties, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Pascaline, thank you very much for this opportunity to come to Monash and to visit again the Europe Centre, and to have the opportunity to thank you for all of the work you're doing here, and the way in which you are interacting with the other centres, the other schools within the university. This is something very important in terms of the Europe Centre, and culminating in sort of the Roundtable today, and the fact of it being about Australia, the European Union and Asia. This is indeed very important. I will not speak for very long, hopefully, and is under instruction to kick me under the table should I be going on over long. There are a couple of remarks that I'd like to make of a more general nature, and then I'll pick up on 1 or 2 points that the other speakers have presented papers on. And there, just to say that it has been a wonderful education also for me this afternoon to hear your presentations. One of the issues that has dominated my time in Australia has been the question of the global financial crisis, firstly, and then the European debt crisis in certain member states, which has led many Australians to ask me questions such as, when will the European Union implode? When will the euro collapse? And I generally take the time to point out that Europe is more resilient than people might think for various reasons, and I'm happy to go into those if you're interested. But one of the things that comes up in these conversations, and today it's very, very appropriate, is that at the same time as people are asking me, when will Europe implode, they're saying, and isn't it great that Australia's in the Asian century and it's all now about Asia? And I ask audiences to put a couple of these images together. A new world, a globalized world, the rise of Asia, and this very negative imagery about the European Union. And I say, well, look, ask yourselves the question, where do you think European leaders see themselves facing this new world? Do you think that European countries view themselves facing this new world with all of the shifts that we've seen demonstrated in the presentations? Do you see European leaders and countries wanting to face those shifts, this new world, simply as leaders of strong countries, or leaders of strong European countries, part of a strong European Union? The answer is overwhelmingly and clearly the latter. The new world is not a world in which European countries want to see the European project unravel so that they can face the new world unencumbered from all of this red tape, so-called regulation from Brussels. The new world is one in which European countries want to face it stronger and stronger together. So this is something to bear in mind. Now, the European Union is not about to disappear. It has a weight in the world, and even though relative positions are shifting, nonetheless, the European Union is a 12 or 13 trillion euro economic space, which is not nothing, and it's not going to implode. So this is the first thing, I think, to just bear in mind, that this is the Europe that we're talking about in relation to facing the new world and the rise of Asia within that. The second issue that often comes up, and it's just come up this morning, is the question of how interested is Europe in Asia, and how is Asia defined. I mean, what is Europe is one question, which we're always happy to discuss, but what is Asia is another question. And how interested are we in Asia? Well, Europe is very interested in Asia. Australia is not the only country interested in how to organize its relations with Asian partner countries. The European Union has strategic partnerships with 4 Asian countries: China, India, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. We have all sorts of networks of all sorts of bilateral agreements with most of the other countries of Asia. Now, is our engagement, are we happy with the level of our engagement with Asia? The answer is no, because we want to increase our engagement with Asia. And we're trying to do that, including on the economic front, with a range of trade negotiations, for free trade agreements and so on. We've concluded one not so long ago with Korea, and at the end of last year with Singapore, and we've just started free trade negotiations with Japan, and we have ongoing negotiations with India and various other countries. Our interest in Asia is also seen in relation to our interest in being able to associate with different parts of the Asian regional architecture. And mention has been made already of ASEM as the Europe-Asia meeting forum. But we, as Pascaline pointed out, the European Union has a long relationship with ASEAN, and the EU is also participating in the ASEAN Regional Forum. But we would like to have a stronger engagement in the Asian regional architecture. And this is something which on one hand is important to us, and on the other hand it's something which a number of countries in Asia and also Australia, that they say to us, countries say to us, you know, we want you to be more involved in Asia, we want that you increase your engagement with Asia. But then we need to follow that up, and those countries, those partners also need to follow it up as well and be logical, and to help us to have exactly that sort of engagement. Now, one of the things that I think we have to be careful about in relation to Europe's engagement with the outside world generally, and it is the question of communication. It is an issue. When we talk, for example, about our engagement with ASEAN or with other regional groupings, we should do so from the point of view, I think, of not saying or not pretending that you can take a photocopy of the European Union and just plonk it down in some other part of the world on a map and say, wouldn't that be wonderful for that group of countries? It doesn't work like that. The European Union is a very European construction reflecting the history and traditions of the European countries that are members of it. Nonetheless, there are important lessons that we have learned in Europe in relation to regional cooperation and integration within regions, which goes beyond purely regional cooperation. There are valuable lessons that we have learned through our experience, and we offer that experience and we offer those lessons to our partners around the world, in Asia and elsewhere. But there is there can be a problem which is linked to something else that came up in the discussions this morning, which is, amongst other things in today's world, not for the first time in history, but there is a clash of ideas as to how the world should look like, how it should be run, how countries should function, and so on. And in Europe, and as the European Union, we are a democratic club that espouses certain values in relation to democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and also the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So here we enter an area which is very tricky for us as the European Union, but not only for us. I'm sure that Australia would recognise also this dilemma. When we are voicing our view on issues like the protection of human rights and the rule of law, we can do that in the most self-effacing manner possible, politically and diplomatically. But those issues affect interests, and it will always be possible for those who wish to do so to say, there you go, there's Europe again preaching at us, or there is the liberal democracy from the West acting as a neo-colonialist. So we have to be careful about the question of communication, and we have to be satisfied with ourselves that we are genuinely trying to engage in a constructive manner with partners and not leaving ourselves open to those sorts of easy criticisms. But we should also recognize that there may be some governments, there may be some people around the world who do not share our ideas on this. And in not sharing our ideas, whether it's human rights or the question of weapons of mass destruction came up earlier, in not sharing those ideas, it is an easy criticism to make. That's the West simply being neo-colonialist. And we have to grapple with that dilemma, and I think that Europe is not alone in having to do that. In going through I want to just pick up on some of the specific points made here and there. I thought that Greg outlined a wonderful framework for the discussion, a reminder of how many elements are perhaps new in terms of paradigm. I mean, 30 years ago, when people spoke about the environment, they thought you were talking about people who were wearing sandals, frayed jeans, t-shirts, and were a little bit odd but very well-meaning. But the environment and environmental concerns can be at the heart of security issues. And while that's not new, the way in which we discuss and think about the environment and resulting issues is perhaps more, it's perhaps different today from in the past. It's very difficult to pick out. I mean, the whole debate has been so interesting. The question of Asia, a criticism that Europe is interested in Asia, defined as China, and China maybe with India, maybe without India, and so on. Well, I've been at plenty of seminars in Australia where Asia was simply defined as China, full stop. And whether that's a conference in Australia or that's a conference in Europe, that is simplistic and dangerously misguided to view Asia in this way. And we had good illustrations of why that is the case. That the other countries are not only important today, but they're also racing ahead in importance. I mean, look at Indonesia, and there are plenty of other countries as well. Yeah, on the question, again, the question of the clash of, what I call them, what is called you can call the clash of ideas. On the question of human rights, the power that people have today in their pockets when they can pull out something like this has transformed the world. And we need to be very alert as to how this can be used for good and for ill. And I thought Sharmini's exposition of that was superb. The role of India that Marika outlined for us is it's a very important reminder that the way that we look on issues is not the only way of looking at issues. I had the great fortune to have been posted earlier in my career to India, where I was made very well aware of the different ways of looking at things and how so many issues have different facets. But I also am aware of how almost every problem in India was defined as the legacy of neo-colonialism, which is a reminder that you have to be careful with the degree to which these sorts of arguments are trotted out. In relation to Iran, it's a case where there is a country that is not yet satisfying the international community, and you can put a footnote there, what is the international community? But the bulk of the international community, at least viewed in the traditional sense of the UN structures, UN institutions, and so on, Iran is not satisfying that international community fully as to its intent with its nuclear program. And the issue is whether Iran is able to do that, and working with Iran to reach that level of satisfaction. Now, that's on one side, but on the other side, we are talking about a country whose leadership has, over a number of years, spoken very lightly of using nuclear weapons to wipe another state off the map of the Middle East. So it's not a small or light issue, but it is one of these issues that gets caught up in this clash of ideas as to how the world should work. And you can have a debate, and there is a debate, of course, about whether the institutions that we gave ourselves at the end of the Second World War, whether those institutions are still adequate for today's world, and how they need to be reformed, and particularly about the weight of emerging countries in those institutions. And I'm sure that as part of the normal political processes, the world is capable of reforming and making institutions from 60 years ago, making them more appropriate for today. I thought that David put a lot of data and concrete edge onto the question of, well, how can the EU and Australia work together on Asia? You know, this question has come up a few times for me in recent years. Australia as a bridge for Europe in Asia and so on. And I do think the situation is one where we definitely, our strengthened partnership with Australia as Europe is very helpful for us. I think that we can help each other in our relations around the world, not only in Asia. There are a couple of examples. I mean, from a Brussels perspective, we view Australia as a country that shares the same values. We're hugely like-minded. We feel that we ought to have been doing more together with Australia up to now, and we want to do more with Australia. There are plenty of global issues out there which neither Europe, nor America, nor China, nor Australia, nor India can solve on their own. And so we need to work together. So obviously working with a like-minded partner like Australia makes an awful lot of sense. Just in parentheses, I'm very happy that in the area of development aid, we reached agreement over my time here, an agreement whereby the EU can implement development assistance projects on behalf of Australia, and Australia can implement development assistance projects on behalf of the European Union. And we have the first examples of this, where there is an EU program in the area of vocational education in Fiji, which Australia will implement. AusAid will implement that on our behalf. And the European Commission is implementing a food security program in South Sudan on behalf of Australia. And these are examples of how we can do more things together. And incidentally, for us as the European Union, Australia is the first country outside of the European Union with which we've been able to make these arrangements. And you can only make arrangements like this with a partner country if you have complete trust in in each other's systems and standards. So it's just another example of working together. I think I will more or less stop there and say that we have had a very rich afternoon up to now, and I'm sure that with questions and answers it will get even richer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I'm sure there's more to come. So I know we have questions from the floor, and these can be directed, of course, to David or to any of our particular speakers. And again, if you could just please say where you're from, if you haven't said so already, and I'll start here. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Rowe, President of the Australian Institute of International Affairs here in Victoria. You offered us a chance to make comments earlier. Now you can find it down to questions. I'm going to comment. Thank you very much, David, for I think it was a very clear exposition of the importance on both sides of of the European-Australian relationship. I think the discussion that has happened here today has been, in a sense, a bit of a false dichotomy, either Europe or Asia. It's no more in Australia's diplomacy to be either Europe or Asia or the South Pacific or the United States or Latin America or Africa. A country has to have diplomatic relations more generally. You don't, because you, at a certain point in your, I suppose, development, determine that you have to beef up a relationship with one. It isn't a case of saying, well, we're going to downgrade relations with another. I forget who it was now who came up with the figures on European investment in Australia compared to Chinese investment, perhaps it was you. But the European investment in Australia is still enormously more important than Asian investment in Australia, as one example of the continuing relationship. David has spoken about collaboration, cooperation with Australia on a whole raft of issues, not just related to Asia, but more broadly the fact that we share many values, that we operate in the international system, that we work together in the United Nations, that we consult about Asia, that we consult about everywhere. It's not just about Asia. I mean, it's just part and parcel of being a national state, that you have to have constructive relationships with people who share the views. You have to work closely with people who share your views. As for the white paper, Australia in the Asian Century, I think it was a clarion call. I think the government needed to say to Australians, see what's happening in Asia. You know, it's really concrete. It's really important. Indonesia is just over the water from us. Everything, almost every plane that flies into Australia flies through Asian airspace. Ships travel through Indonesian waters. The links between Australia and Indonesia, for example, are immensely important to this country. And yet, in the last 20 years, you've seen the development of the Australia-Indonesian relationship falter. Australians, all those Australians go to Bali. I was in the, and there are a huge number. The last time I went to Bali, I was in the departure lounge filling in the forms, and there were two young blokes next to me, and one said to the other, hey, you got to fill in country you go to. What country we go to? The other said, God, you're stupid. It's Bali, of course. Now, you know, that's a bit unfair, but you know, people go to Bali, but they don't go to Java, they don't go to Sumatra, they don't go to the rest of Indonesia, they don't see the enormous variety, the enormous importance of this country, Australia. So that's just one example of why it was necessary for clarion call. It was necessary for, I think, for the government to say to Australia, we have to put resources into building up our capacity to work with a region that is going to be fundamentally important to us from now on. So I think we ought to avoid the notion of either or. It's you work with who you have to work with, and we obviously have to work very closely with the European Union because it's in our interest and it's in the European Union's interest. Not because we are a bridge in any sense between Asia and Europe. That is the most offensive, ridiculous, absurd notion. Europe doesn't need a bridge. You know, we don't need a bridge. The Europeans are not our bridge to Asia. We're not their bridge to Asia. We're collaborative colleagues. We talk to the bridge. Our firms, there may be British firms, European firms who invest in Australia because it's a good place to do business in Asia. That's a bridge, but it's not a bridge. And let's not get into this notion that somehow or other Australia is a bridge. Europeans know what they're doing. They've been engaged in diplomacy for quite a while, and they do it quite well, and they don't need us to tell them. Okay, that's really what I wanted to say. No questions.
So that's all right. So we'll develop that theme, bridge, and either or, and I'll take a couple more, and then we'll open it up. So in the centre there.
Yes, hello, Dennis Walker. I'm researching southern Thailand or Patani at the Monash Asia Institute. I've been listening with great interest to your observations about the new system in Europe which developed after the Second World War, which did give cultural rights to nationalities which had previously lacked states for a long time. And the main nationalist states of Europe regarded they had some sort of holy mission to completely wipe out their languages and impose a single monolingual state language. I mean, Greece didn't exist in a cultural sense when it became independent, and Italy didn't really exist in a cultural sense when it became independent. But innumerable languages have been destroyed or severely impaired and wounded. Now, what I wonder is whether the European Union might be able to help the people of southern Thailand. I believe if the European Union is regarded very seriously in Thailand, as I can see from the economic and cultural pages of the Thai press. Perhaps I don't believe the Thai system is at all got rid of this idea or has really repudiated or moved away from this idea. They have a holy mission to exterminate Malay in southern Thailand and impose print Thai as the only language of written and spoken discourse. Although they've made some concessions, I believe they're sort of deformed concessions which aren't serious. Now, it seems that there are people in the European Union who fancy themselves as peacemakers in Thailand, and that's in their own interest, because I've received thinly veiled threats from Patania nationalists that if the European countries, the USA, the Anglomorph states continue to supply arms and military training to Thailand, that they will at some stage, they will undertake probably some sort of terrorist activities against those states.
Right, so Dennis, so that's a question about the role of the EU.
The EU, I wonder whether they could put, first of all, it'd be great if you could tell us about the EU's current roles in the negotiations, which in the attempts to involve various exile southern Thai groups in Sweden in a negotiated settlement. And secondly, if you couldn't assume some sort of a range of proactive roles which will deliver an unmistakable message to the Thai government. They're not allowed in the postmodern world to implement a 19th century ideology which is characterised by linguistic fanaticism.
Right, thank you. And is it time for one more? Natalie, and we'll come back to this.
Well, if I may, it's also more of a comment rather than a question. I'm Natalie Doyle, I'm Deputy Director of the Monash European EU Centre. I just want to pick up on a number of comments that were made earlier and connect it back to what David said, which is the theme of communication. And I suppose my comment will go along the lines that it's important for the two people when one is trying to communicate with others to clarify one's own language as well as to learn the language of the other side. And I want to connect it back, I suppose, also to the point that Marike said about the statement of that Indian academic whose name obviously
diplomat Shashi Tharoor,
about Europe being post-national when the world, the rest of the world is not, and connected to the comment that was made here about Asian countries saying to European countries, please fix up your economy. And that obviously leads me to the point that of course, what Europe, I believe, is experiencing now is not just a financial crisis. It's also precisely something to do with clarifying the language. Because the financial crisis, I think, has exposed in Europe that not only there had been that language of Europe having become post-national, but also having become post-political. And what the financial crisis actually exposed is no, Europe is in fact still to a large extent national, right? And it still very much needs political guidance. And the problem has been that at the European level it doesn't have it sufficiently to address the challenge of the final crisis, which is obviously linked to the insertion of Europe in a global financial system. So I'm talking about the discrepancy between two languages, the post-national, post-political language, which has been dominant in Europe, but in a sense covered over what you said, Marika, but when you look at things, it's still the nation states that negotiate the levels between these things. And of course, all this happened, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible so we have time for discussion, when in fact the civilizational supremacy of European ideas had not yet been questioned, and in fact had just got a boost because the Soviet Union had disintegrated. So that gave it a lot more impetus. And I suppose I would like to suggest that obviously now that's no longer the case. So that what you see in Europe is certainly a very strong sense of a loss of civilizational supremacy, which is not just that of Europe, but it's linked obviously to the American world. And Australia, I think, is also part of this. So I would like to put this idea that Australia is also facing this problem of its own civilizational identity and its loss of status, if you want, because of that shift of power, which you can express in purely economic terms or in a broader sense. Now, of course, Australia's been there before, and that was a loss of empire. And it was linked to Europe. It was when the UK decided to join the European Economic Community, and suddenly Australia looked around and said, oh my God, here we are, we're left on our own. So there may be a commonality here, which I think is what David was discussing when you were talking about the values and so on, or the idea of natural ally, that in a sense, Australia is going through a similar crisis, but maybe is not, in fact, articulating it. And the white people in the Asian century is an expression also of that tendency to reposition Australia in the world in the face of this loss of civilizational supremacy, but in favor of what? And that's, that was Remy's point. There is no clear evidence that there is an outside civilization that's actually coming to take over that role of supremacy. We're talking about China because it appears to be the next contender, but can it not? So that's why, Remy's point of what the other parts of the world, or India, or Africa, or Latin America. So I'm sorry it was a bit of a long comment, but what struck me was really this question of the language that we actually use to discuss all those things.
Very quick, the man in the Scooby-Doo t-shirt.
My question is Ambassador Daly. I'd be keen to get your opinion on what Marika was talking about earlier about the fear that the West has of the Asian century, and what role, if any, Australia might play as a bridge, or not, as we've heard, in being a part of or mitigating that fear.
All right, great. So we've got civilization